All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for attending the virtual parent forum for middle school parents. I would remind everybody it's best if we keep our mics muted, and you're welcome to certainly mute your video camera as well. We made it through our elementary forum, and I'm looking forward to sharing some information with you this evening. What we have done with the electronic document where you submitted questions is we've compiled those questions. I think we had 160 some questions, and we've built them into some slides towards the end of the presentation. Some of them I don't have full answers to, but I'll answer as many as I can. I might also ask Mr. Martz, who's on with us tonight, or Mr. Emil, if they had anything else to add. We have Mary Selden, our Special Services Director, is on this evening, and Jennifer McFarland, our Assistant Superintendent of Academic Services. So what I want to do tonight is do an overview of the preparedness plan, because I know many of you might not have attended the board meeting. I'm not going to go into the detail we did that evening, because you've been given updates that have a summary of that information. And if you haven't read through all of those, I would encourage you to do that, because it will support you making your learning option choice. But also, if something happens and you didn't receive those for some reason, they are all posted on the district webpage under the COVID-19 tab. So if I put a communication out to you, the thing I do after I program the message is I send that communication to Lisa File in our technology department and ask her to post it on the webpage. So I am recording, and it'll take us some time tomorrow morning to get this recording formatted and uploaded so that we can share a link with you on the COVID-19 tab where you could go and watch it. Or if you know other parents that weren't able to attend tonight, they could watch it as well. So we're not at max in our Google Meet, so that I'm grateful for that all the parents that wanted to be on this evening could. If you are on the elementary presentation, you're welcome to stay on, but it's going to be a similar presentation. There will be some points and times where we will speak more specifically to middle school. And if you're on with a middle school and a high school child, I think this would probably be sufficient, and you wouldn't need to attend tomorrow evening at 5:30, but you could. So I'll dive into these first series of slides. I have Mr. Martz is watching the chat. So I would encourage you to use the chat option, because that is how you can tell us comments and questions that you have. They may get answered this evening, but if they don't, we're going to turn those questions into an FAQ, and that could come from me, or that could come from the middle school administration as well. So please use the chat. We get an export of what is put in the chat at the end of the recording. So know that we'll have that information captured, and that's helpful for us and us getting you the information that you need. All right, next slide, please, Mary. So I think it's really important that parents understand, and I think most of you are getting this now, because we've tried to emphasize this, is, you know, our reopening of school is guided by two important documents. The first is the preparedness plan that's required by the state. And that was completed and approved by the Board of Education Monday night. We're making some final edits to the official document that we'll submit to the ISD before the end of the week. And we'll also post that on the COVID-19 webpage. That's a 68-page document. So the reason why we have given you overviews is we've tried to distill it down so that it's easier and pertinent information and isn't as lengthy as it is to get through it. But if you want to read the detailed plan, it will be available on the website prior to the end of the week. Then we are working on now in what we call Romeo's Return to Learn Roadmap Plan. And that document is more of the day-to-day local implementation strategies, specific school schedules, and we'll speak specifically about the roadmap tonight. But the roadmap is now being developed, and as we go into updates next week and in the weeks leading up to the start of the school year, you're going to be getting roadmap specific updates. And a lot of the questions that we're seeing is more detailed information that comes in the roadmap or comes from the building level versus anything that would be in the preparedness plan. So 2 important documents, one is approved and done, and one is still underway, and you'll be getting updates on that as soon as next week. Next slide. Next slide, Mary, please. Oops.
While we're waiting for Ms. Sullivan to come back on, we had one question that just came up about how middle school students are going to handle 6 classes in a 3-hour day while in traditional learning. We're currently working on that plan, and we're looking at some different plans to be able to do maybe possibly 3 classes per day to kind of limit the number of hours that they're on a computer. So that was one of the questions on there.
All right. I don't know if Mrs. Sullivan lost connectivity or not. All right, so I will present. It's just hard for me to see the chat and present at the same time, but Mrs. Sullivan, oh, you're on. Good, perfect. Thank you. All right, so we talked about the 2 documents. Now let's go through a little bit of an overview. You know, we've been guided by the governor's My Safe Start plan and the executive order 2020-142. Those are on our website if you want to refer to those. Next slide, please. We also have leaned heavily on the safe return to school roadmap document. This was the governor's task force guidance 60-page document that really requires and lays out what the preparedness plan has to be. Macomb County is in Region 1. Region 1 is in Phase 4. The entire state is in Phase 4. And all indications show that we're going to spend a significant time the beginning of the school year in Phase 4. I have joked and said all I want for Christmas is Phase 5. And I think that could be realistic, that we're well into the fall and maybe into the winter months before we see that. But we think we've got a good plan to meet the requirements of the roadmap. We know that there's logistical challenges at the family level as well as the district level, but we're hopeful we can make this happen and offer some in-person schooling to start the school year. Next slide. So there's been a tremendous collaborative effort at the county level. Our county superintendent's group has worked with executive office, emergency management, and the health department to create a common preparedness plan template. So I think you would find that when these are posted on district websites, these plans will look very similar across all the school districts. You know, one of the things that was asked to me was, well, if we're all on a common plan, why are different districts making different decisions about reopening? This still has the local control. The county plan template was turned over off of collaborative work that we could do, but every local district has the discretion to implement it because every local school board is the approval entity. So we have worked collaboratively, and we have received a tremendous amount of support from both the ISD and the county office. Next slide. We've had a series of things that we've leaned on and continue to lean on in our planning. I would emphasize our task force teams who are still working and will be working probably through the start of the school year. And we're grateful for the input that we get from forums like this because you might share some things in the chat tonight that will help us think about things that we need to get you in our roadmap. Okay. We also are working heavily with our board at formal meetings and through electronic communication as well. Next slide. So the preparedness plan is laid out in 4 main categories: safety, operations, instruction, and social, emotional, and mental supports. We have been communicating you with, through these categories in the updates. Our social, emotional, and mental supports task force is led by Mrs. Selden. She has an update for you specific to that programming that will be coming out the beginning of next week. And once we do that, then you're going to begin to see, as we go into the roadmap, that our updates speak to all categories of the plan as necessary in that update. We're using this graphic that has been used in a couple different school districts across the state to represent the fact that this is kind of like a gauge, and based on the phase that the state is in, decides, kind of where we're at. So you'll see that we don't have a choice by executive order. If the state is in phase 3 or lower, we will be in 100% virtual learning. I will tell you, if that happens, our remote learning will be way different than it was in the spring, and you will see that quickly at the beginning of the school year if you choose the online option. Our transition in is the hybrid schedule start, and that is going to be employed in phase 4 and will likely go into phase 5. I am not sure that we have a scenario of 100% in-seat attendance full day every day until we move into phase 5 and probably closer to phase 6. Next slide, please. So there's 15 categories in safety protocols that we've broken down and detailed in the plan from the county template. The update that was sent to you on operations and safety last Friday night is the document that I would strongly recommend you use to understand the practices that we're implementing and how they impact your learning option choice. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through every section, but I grabbed a screenshot of what that document looks like. I want to emphasize that our updates and all of our planning right now is specific to phase 4, but our preparedness plan has phase 5 because we had to speak to all 6 phases. What we're going to be doing now, once we get school up and running, is going back and making any final changes that we might need to make to a phase 1 through 3, element of where the state would be at. But I would tell you that the strength of the hybrid schedule, if we do this right, is going to be that you're going to see a consistent daily schedule, even if we have to move back to phase 3 or we have groups of students in a building that have to quarantine because of a case. So we want to make this so it's streamlined, effective, and support you as parents so you can support your children. Okay, next question, please. So hygiene and education is really important. Hygiene is more of, we're going to be teaching and talking to our kids about hand sanitizer and washing hands and that, and it will be a regular routine. Spent 15 years of my life as a middle school educator, and I can only hear our middle school kids now. They're not big fans of washing their hands on a regular basis, but in between our administration and our teaching staff, and with your support from home, we're going to make sure that they adhere to these hygiene standards. And in many cases at the middle school level, we're going to be having to use hand sanitizer because we just don't have the volume of restrooms and sinks to make that a regular routine like we can at the elementary level. And it's no different with the high school. The high school is a little uniquely positioned just because the building is new and the setup of the sinks is much more. They're the widespread trough sinks in that if you have not been in one of the restrooms at the new building. So a lot of hand sanitizer for our middle school kids, but certainly the opportunity to also use the restroom and wash hands as well. Next slide. Cleaning and sanitizing. Our hybrid schedule supports the fact that we're going to be able to do this more often and more thoroughly. The greatest challenge that we have at the middle and high school level is students changing classes and the need for us to try and sanitize desktops and workstations in between every new group of students. So we've got a couple of questions later on the slides about that I'll speak to. Next slide, please. So I want to make sure parents know that one of the greatest things that has happened for us in Macomb County is the county executive's office and the county received allocation of CARES Act money because Macomb County has more than 500,000 residents, and they have taken a legitimate percentage of those funds and dedicated them to support K-12 education. And so that started with the county working with us to make a bulk order of PPE and some cleaning equipment and supplies to get us 30 to 60 days to start the beginning of the school year. And they have paid for that. Additionally, they are finalizing the plan to dedicate some financial resources to support technology needs. We do not have the demand that other districts have in that regard because we were a one-to-one district beforehand, but we're hopeful to allocate some of those resources to some conferencing cameras for our teachers to use in the classroom, and also to support the possibility of some hotspot support for our families that are having connectivity trouble at home. So you'll see some pretty significant numbers. You know, we have on site in district over 300,000 adult and student disposable face masks, 308 boxes of gloves. I have on site over 4,000 face shields because one of our business partners, PTI Plastics, donated them to us, and those are available for use for adults or students. We have 308 gallon bottles of hand sanitizers with pumps. So every classroom will start the school year with their own gallon. Plus, we have made our own internal order for dispensers and hand sanitizer to put in the commons areas. So just know that between signage and marking and additional supplies, some specialized face masks for our speech pathologists and some of our special ed staff, extra gloves and PPE and thermometers in that for our offices. We're uniquely positioned with the support of the county, and we're already planning for our second order right now, and we haven't even started school. Next slide. Spacing, movement, and access is a greater challenge as we get into our secondary buildings. So that's why middle school and high school students will not be using their lockers in phase 4. They will be issued a locker. We're not going to get all hung up on learning the combination until we have to, because our 6th graders will struggle with that if we do it at the beginning and then we do it again before we go into phase 5. When we're ready to move into phase 5, we'll create the orientation and make sure students know where their locker is and what the combination is, and we'll use our student advisory period to make sure that kids get a chance to practice and all of that good stuff. So we will be asking that they use their backpacks. I would ask that they don't carry everything they own, but carry the things that they need for that day. That's also going to allow them the ability to carry their own water bottle. And we're hopeful that the bottle that they have would supply them enough water to get them through the shortened day. But we can't use regular drinking fountains at the phase 4 level. And there is some water bottle filling drinking fountains at the new middle school, but not enough to support every student. So we're hopeful that you already have that type of water bottle in that. I see a question in the chat about coats and umbrellas. I would say the small retractable umbrellas on the days where you need them, that can be put in the backpack or in the side pocket. And a lot of our high school kids keep their coat with them all day anyway. So they will have to carry that stuff with them. Our teachers will do a great job to make sure that they know they don't have to wear it all day. So I think that's a bit on spacing, movement, and access that's specific to middle school. Next slide, please. So screening of students, we really need your help at home to monitor that. One of the concerns that I know parents keep asking me is, parents send their kids to school sick all the time because they have to go to work. If that's ever been something that you've been a part of, I will profess to you that when I was a parent, there might have been a time or two where we used a little Tylenol and hoped that my daughter or my son were going to be fine. And sometimes we got the call and we had to go pick them up. That is not a practice we want to have happen in the middle of a global pandemic. Okay, if your child is experiencing symptoms, keep them home until they're symptom free. Let us know what's going on at the school level, and if we should be informed about symptoms from your child. We are not allowing visitors in the building. With the setup of the secured entry at the new middle school, you are likely to have to enter the Sallyport entrance at the middle school, but it will be a rare occasion where you will be able to get beyond that. And we are going to be working with Mr. Emil and Mr. Martz to have a setup with a card outside that, so that if there's something we need to get to your child, or there's documents that you need to get to someone in the building, in the event that we do have to have you as an in-person meeting, or your child's sick and we need you to come in and help get them out to the car, you would have to be temperature screened and be symptom free, complete our access form. But you can really expect that there will be not a lot of access. When we talk about visitors, we begin to think about things about Bulldog Days and that. And I know we're working on a plan that the Bulldog Day event, well, we're going to take care of most of that. And if we have time at the end of the chat tonight, I'll have Mr. Martz speak to the details. Just, we don't have it all mapped out yet, but we're certainly, that's one of the things that's a high priority to them. Part of it might be a tremendous gift to you as a parent, because we'll work through our advisory period and a system within the school day to complete all those tasks that we would do at Bulldogs Day, and do it at a pace and make sure that all students are taken care of. There's also a large part of Bulldog Days that are families that choose the online learning option. It just isn't a priority to start the school year. Next slide, please. Transportation. In your registration gateway process on the learning option form, we ask you to let us know if you don't intend to use district transportation. You may be a parent that pre-pandemic, transported your kid to and from school anyways, or you're now going to do that just because you want to avoid the bus, at least till we get to a better place in time in navigating COVID-19. One of the questions that came up is, when we move to phase 5, or we're returning all kids to in person, will we be able to resume transportation? Yes. It might take us a couple days if you have a unique stop that we haven't been driving on, we haven't been stopping at. But we're not looking to stop a bunch of our bus runs. In Romeo, we're 60 plus square miles. So if we have a bus go to many more stops in the north end of the district, the kids are on the bus way too long. So we want the hybrid schedule and the families that choose the online learning, in addition to families that choose to do self-transport, to help us socially distance our buses. Okay. I love middle school kids. Okay. But I also have the greatest concern about middle school kids following the bus protocol. Because middle school kids always have a tendency to be the most challenging group of kids for our bus drivers to deal with. We do not have plans to put additional adults on the bus at this time. It will be the expectation that your kids wear their mask on the bus and that they use hand sanitizer. If they have the clearance with the right medical documentation to not wear a mask on the bus or in school, we're going to recommend that they use a face shield, and we can provide that. If your doctor's documentation says that they're intolerable to even a shield, then of course we wouldn't have them doing either. Okay, but we really need you to help us with your kids that are on the bus to make sure they're following the rules, because if they don't follow the rules on the bus, they're not going to have access to the bus. And I hope we don't get into that situation. Next slide, please. So posted on the district webpage and referred to in our communications and linked to the update that I sent you last Friday night is the county health department's recommended case management protocols. All 21 districts in the county are following the same protocols. We will update this protocol system with the best advice of health and science from the county health department weekly as a part of my superintendent level communications. So this is the most up-to-date protocols based on Health and Human Services at the state level and CDC guidelines, and the contact tracing and the case management numbers that they're getting from medical professionals. Okay. Next slide, please. So as we looked at preparedness and finalized our plan, we knew that there was some major challenges in phase 4, and that is when the idea of converting our traditional learning option students to the hybrid START schedule, and I emphasize START, became a reality. So listed on the screen here is some of the major things that we knew were challenging that led us to developing the hybrid schedule and have us shortening the day through the first 3 steps of that. So, feeding lunch, cleaning desks and surfaces in between classes, limiting movement in the building, allowing extra time for cleaning and sanitizing, our staffing concerns. Those are all things that we considered and resulted in the hybrid schedule. We also have a clear division in our community of where parents are at and what parents' desires are. And I know all you fall on one side of that. I would just ask that, you do your best to understand the operations and safety protocols, understand what traditional versus online is. If there's any possibility of the Romeo Virtual Academy program being an option for you, I'll talk a little bit about that this evening. And at that point in time, make your choice and stick together with us, because if we stick together, that's only going to help us get to all in-person learning sooner. Next slide, please. So Mrs. Selden has been leading our social, emotional, and mental health task force, and they have an update, as I said, coming out to you the beginning of next week. But I've asked her to share a couple slides and update you, because this is really important to us as an organization. It was the emphasis of the spring last year when we started the closure, and it is still really important. But we know right now the focus for you to make a choice is on instruction and operations and safety. So Mary, talk to our parents a little bit about where we're at with social emotional support.
Hi, everyone. Our task force has been meeting and working on these supports to continue to not only support students with social emotional health, but also to prepare teachers on how to create relationships with students that are possibly in a virtual setting. So some of the things that we've been working on are, we are going to continue our student wellness survey, similar to the one that we gave out in the spring. We got a tremendous response from that, and it was very helpful. We're going to continue our electronic Google form request for additional supports from counselors or social workers. We will have a district screener that could be used if any students are showing signs of any mental health concerns or difficulties in the classroom or outside of the classroom. And we also will be creating a wellness email so that you can ask questions, request additional supports or information, and we can send that to you directly. We have bolstered our community resources and have created even more relationships with local agencies and nonprofit groups to support us if needed. And we have a plethora of wellness videos, online resources, recommendations for supports inside and outside of the school setting to share with you. On top of that, we're also supporting our staff, because we know if we support our staff, that also helps support our students. So we will be supporting staff with wellness, self-care, self-awareness, and teaching them about student trauma, social emotional learning, equity in the classroom, and mental health. And also providing our staff with those community resources that I just talked about, so they can share them with you if you reach out for help, and we can work together as a team to get you the most information possible. And then, as always, especially with COVID, we are updating our crisis plan to make sure that we have a continuum of services, whatever need might come up.
Dr. Robinson, you're on mute.
We've all experienced that at one time or another. I'm sorry. When we began to look at, okay, now there's this preparedness plan and we got to align with that and we got to submit it. But we also know we have to do a lot of work to implement it locally through our roadmap. There was really some key areas that we were focusing on that really helped us develop and get to the point where we recommended to the board the hybrid schedule start. So we certainly wanted to have a safe start to the school year, and we wanted to do everything we could to represent or align with social distancing. Okay? And the only way we're able to do that, quite honestly, in any of our buildings, specifically our secondary, is by reducing the number of students that come to school each day. Okay, so we are not going to remove desks from classrooms. We are going to have less kids using less desks, and it's almost like a restaurant. One of the unique things that is happened because of COVID-19 with the new building that I'll share with our middle school parents is because of your support of the 2016 bond, we have invested $855,000 into new furnishings and new furniture for the new middle school. However, the factories that make that furniture were shut down for 6 weeks plus back in the spring. And our work with our architect and furniture liaisons through the bond was delayed to start. But Mr. Martz and I and a few others spent concerted time the end of last year and into the summer to really make sure we weren't rushing. So some of our furnishings, and when I say furnishings, the redesign of the main office, the furniture and the cabinetry for the secured entry, it's more than just a student chair and a student desk. We have some of that furniture coming in next week and it will be deployed, but a lot of the student furniture will not be in until late September. So we're outfitting the building with existing furniture from the old high school that is viable, but also potentially some furniture that's coming from the former Romeo Middle School building. So we're gonna potentially furnish classrooms only to the need of our traditional learners on the hybrid schedule. And then when the new furniture arrives, that's less for us to pull out to put the new in. So you may see less desks in a classroom at the middle school simply because we're still waiting for the new furniture to come in. So we really want to establish routines and focus on the classroom. Okay, a 7-hour day of school has a lot of time in it that isn't classroom specific. And we felt like establishing that routine and ensuring the safety at that level was most important. We also have close to 1,200 kids that would have been coming in if everyone was coming to school in and out of the building every day. So by using the hybrid schedule, we'll have some families that are online to start and only half of the remaining kids coming into the building. I really anticipate that it's going to be maybe 450 kids to 500 kids coming to school daily of our traditional option choices. It could be even a little bit less than that. That will look a whole lot different in accessing in arrival and dismissal, and also in transition in between classes. Okay. All right, next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the hybrid start schedule. You got a visual depiction of that and some of the content that's in the slides in the update I sent last night that came around 8 p.m. Update number 3, I think it was referred to. If you haven't read that, I really recommend you do because it gives as much detail as we have right now on the hybrid schedule. and we'll provide you a little bit more of where thinking is at now as a part of the forum tonight. So hybrid is a 4-step process into the school year, and it includes in the first few weeks of the school year some all remote days on Wednesday. All remote days prepare our students in the event that we should have to go back to phase 3. It also allows us a concerted amount of time to do more deep cleaning and sanitizing. So we have some of those built in, and I'll show you how that looks on the calendar in another slide here. We are hopeful that we can transition to step 4 of the hybrid schedule start in the first 6 weeks of the year, but our movement to step 4 and our movement out of step 4 is not definite at this time. And we must be in phase 5 to return to full day, full attendance, even just for our traditional option students. Okay, you're making a choice that is your choice for the first trimester. If you go back to the calendar dates, I think it's somewhere around November 13th when our trimester comes to a close. We'll see where we're at in the phased reopening. We'll be communicating, through the middle school admin staff about what that might look like if you're looking to make the move from online to traditional. And based on our cohorts and your student schedule, that might have some things changing with what classes they might be in. We also know that we have elective course changes aligned to trimesters as well. So that's a little different navigation in terms of some of our elective classes. Next slide, please. So this gives you kind of a visual depiction of what our cohorts are. There are certainly far more than one child in each cohort, but cohort number 1 and 2 are an even distribution of all of our students whose families choose the traditional learning option. So this is why all of our parents making their learning option choice by the 17th gives us the critical data we need to do our cohorting. So when we know all the families that want traditional in-person to start the school year on the hybrid schedule, okay, we will start by looking at them in terms of alphabetical by last name. However, know that we will align your cohort with your elementary child or your high school child or all three if that is a necessity. I will tell you, if they all have the same last name, they will all likely end up in the same traditional cohort anyways. If you're in that zone of a last name that's L or M, that might be where, we got to be a little bit more intentional, okay? So please know that when you make the choice, you'll be hearing which cohort you're in probably early in the week of August 24th, but in time so that you would know what the schedule is and what days your students are supposed to come to school. All of our students who choose cohort 3 are online only, will be in their own cohort, and who is going to teach them will be based on what we see. So I'll give you an example that I think is something that we have a vision to potentially do. Is we may have a teacher that all of our middle school teachers teach 5 classes if they're full-time at the middle school. So if I was a teacher and I had 5 sections of 6th grade social studies, but overall we know that there is enough students in cohort 3 that could form an all online section, then one of our teachers might have 4 in-person traditional 6th grade social studies classes and 1 section that's online. And they then, of course, would teach that class at that point in time in the day to those students, and that would be virtually with them from their classroom. We don't know how that's going to work, and I quite honestly think our cohorts will overlap, meaning our cohort 3 students might still be in the traditional class that's in their schedule, and they are in there also with students with in the traditional option. So you got to be flexible and patient with us and know that we're going to get you the information, and the teacher's learning management classroom system will also be providing you that information as well. The Romeo Virtual Academy is essentially its own school entity. We don't call it its own cohort, but it is. It is open to 6th through 12th grade students only. And I have a slide on that and a couple slides here, and I'll talk about the process. If you're selecting the Romeo Virtual Academy, or you think that might be a good option for your child, that starts with a transition meeting with one of our counselors to determine if it's the right placement. If you went through one of those transition meetings and it wasn't the right placement, we will change you back to the online only option. All right, next slide, please. So when we look at the first 4 or 5 weeks of the school year, we've laid the hybrid schedule on top of the calendar, and you'll see in step 1, it is traditional 3-hour half days. It is the same start time that was publicized to you with the calendar a few weeks ago. I don't want to guess at that because I don't have a calendar in front of me. Mr. March, do you know what that time is?
First start of school, Todd?
Yes.
8:15.
All right. So 8:15 is the start for traditional option students, regardless of what step we're in. Okay. The end of the day, you know, for this week already, because the half-day schedule has been presented to you, we will get you the updated modified day dismissal time, but I would tell you that it's going to be somewhere in between 12:15 and probably 12:22, depending on if we have to go a little bit more than 4 hours to support the busing schedule. So the first 4 days is half days every other day for our in-person students, and 2 check-ins online in the afternoon for our 2 check-ins in the afternoon for our online students, and you'll get more detail about when those are when we get your learning option choices completed. Okay, the key to step 1 is orientation. Getting our traditional students used to the routine, and we will likely just simply communicate to you who your student's student advisory teacher is, and we will start the school day on the first day in advisory and probably every day through the hybrid start. And this is where we will simplify for your students. All you need to do is get to school and get in the building, have your mask on, have your stuff, and get to this classroom. And from there, our staff will take care of making sure they know where they need to go. You will see your students' full schedule before the start of school, but it will be critical that we just get you to that first day, to that first class, because we don't envision an opportunity to start the year for a tour of the building and a walk of you with your child to each of their classes. But we'll maybe shed a little light on that for Mr. Martz in terms of Bulldog Days in a few minutes here. Step 2 moves us to the modified day. That is the 4-hour day that we'll be in until we get to step 4. And you can see our cohorts are 1 and 2 just alternate. And we know we've had some input from parents about, well, maybe it should be Monday, Tuesday for 1 and 3rd. We're making that decision based on instruction. I would fully anticipate that it's going to work this way because I know our secondary teachers feel that it is better for instruction to have that separation in between their in-person days. But if we are going to make a change on that, we would certainly communicate that to you, and that would likely be communicated next week. So step 2 is still in a pace of new content, probably every other day. Okay. The pace of getting to the curriculum will not be new content every day. If we're working well and our teachers are able to institute that, then step 2 would include that. But I know I've had some people say, I don't see anything different in between step 2 and step 3. Well, there is a difference because in step 3, we're looking to have fully ironed out our cohorts. Cohorts might be changing into step 2. Because we need to do that based on not having accurate learning option choices, or we're also navigating our teachers who for medical reasons or otherwise cannot return to in-person schooling, and we might be taking some of our middle school teachers and developing an all online schedule for them. We have to know where they are on that, and we have to know how many of you want online. But step 3 will then transition into the latter half of September. So if you can go to the next slide, please. And what you're going to see in step 3 is established cohorts and the integration of live live instruction into the 4-hour day for all of our learners. Mr. Martz, anything more about step 3 that you would want to highlight right now based on the instructional task force?
No, there's a couple of questions that came up about what the actual day looks like in a 3 or 4 hour day. And we're currently working on those plans right now to provide those opportunities and looking at those gaps in student learning. Since we've been out of school for a while, we're looking at the gaps there to make sure we can catch up the students to where they're at this point in time.
Okay.
So that's all for those pieces there.
I would tell you that if you have a high school student and you know how the block schedule works, where they see 4 classes a day on a red-white alternating schedule, I think the intent, Mr. Martz, of you guys is to develop in a middle school version, having 6 classes in advisory, a red-white rotation. Is that true?
That is our first attempt right now, is looking at an advisory every day. And that advisory class will help us get our kids orientated and touring the building. And our online students will have that opportunity too, to be able to see the building via videos from me or anything of that nature. And then we'd have first, second, and third hour, and that would be our red day, or the first day. The second day would be the advisory in hours 4, 5, and 6. So it would be very similar to the structure of the high school right now to provide that instruction for our students, because they'll be in there for a shortened period of time.
All right. Thank you. So look for more detail coming on that, as soon as next week, and certainly the week of the 24th. So you see all remote days in there. That is where all 3 cohorts will align, and they'll be working within that 4-hour schedule. It's our goal that those days look and function like a modified day as far as the rotation of classes, certainly to start. But there could be learning that happens beyond the modified day, asynchronous assignments or other things like that, check-ins with individual teachers. These all remote days allow for additional cleaning and sanitizing, and they also allow for more collaboration and planning and training for our staff. We have a PD day on September 30th, so there's no school for students regardless of what cohort you're in that day. So we're hopeful to transition to step 4 as soon as October 1st. It might take longer for us to get there. And when we transition to that, we just simply take the modified day goes away, and it is now a full day. Students would be eating lunch at school, and we would still be in half the traditional students attending. So we will lengthen the day before we add more kids on an individual day. I haven't talked about lunch, but you'll have the opportunity to get lunch if you're free lunch, get the reduced price lunch, or actually pay for lunch. And our food service team will be working those will be prepackaged lunches that are packed the morning of that day, and they're delivered to the last classroom of the day so that your students can put it in their backpack and take it home with them. And we'll have detail on how you purchase that ahead of time. I know the goal of Mrs. Hall, our food service director, is to have families purchase a week at a time. So if you are in traditional and you are coming to school on Monday and Thursday, and you want your child to get a lunch Monday and Thursday, then we would arrange that, and they would have that before they leave. We also will be offering the breakfast service. No meals start until September 8th. So step 1 doesn't have any food service. They'll be using that work to train and prepare and get the system ironed out, and also integrate with our teachers of how it will work to get students their lunches. Next slide, please. So if you have younger children in early childhood, know that we're attempting to align preschool with the hybrid schedule, at least to start the school year. Also know that if you have children in GSRP or ECSE, they are on the same schedule. However, some of our students in those programs may attend school every day because because of their needs or because of their class size is already reduced. So more information coming on the programming from Croswell and Mrs. Beck as we get into next week. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the roadmap, and a lot of questions parents have, the roadmap is really what gets you the nuts and bolts. I've listed some things on the screen here that will be coming to you in updates beginning next week and all the way through the start of school. You know, specific arrival and dismissal routines and schedules. We don't have recess or playground, but meal service, details about what Bulldog Days is, what our open house program will look like. If there's any elective class accommodations, you're going to get information on an orientation to the Schoology learning management platform. What are the hour-by-hour schedules for hybrid and traditional students? You're going to get cohorting information. All of that will be put together. You're also going to get an extension to the student code of conduct and student handbook. There will be specific mention to following the protocols for traditional in-person schooling. So if your child is going to challenge masking requirements, we're certainly going to give them a reminder or two. But if they can't follow the rules that they have to follow for in-person and schooling, they're going to be moved to online. And we need your support to make sure they know that you're going to do this right. And if they cannot medically tolerate a mask and you have that documentation, we're going to recommend they use a face shield. But if it's at that level where they can't use either, then certainly we're going to make sure that that's known to staff and they would be provided that accommodation. So please, please, please reinforce with us. The last thing I want our administrators doing is dealing with discipline around masking all day long. And I also don't care for our teachers to have to keep making those reminders in the classroom. Middle school kids are old enough to know the importance of that. I know that they haven't been doing that in many cases now. And so part of the reason of us doing a 3-hour day first and then a 4-hour day for a concerted period of time is so that they can get used to wearing a mask for a shorter period of time prior to them going to school for a full-length day. Next slide, please. So in person with a hybrid start, why are we ready? Why are we uniquely positioned as a district? You know, our county level collaboration, the safety and operations and the PPE ordering and that, plus our internal ordering, we're already a one-to-one district. So remote learning from a technology resources standpoint is fluid. The goal of our instructional team since they've started working has been to enhance remote learning. It will not be what you experienced in the spring, and it will get scaled up and pretty rigorous across the first 3 steps of the hybrid schedule. Our secured entrances across our facilities just simply support essential visitors only until the time we can open things up a little bit more. And I would just tell you that, you know, Romeo is a unique place. I think we have a unique staff. I think we're a unique size. And I think we have a unique community and group of families that, regardless of where you're at on this, if you're certain of what the schedule is, I think we can work together to make this a go. Is it 100% certain that we couldn't be starting in remote? I can't tell you that it is, because the governor has some control on that. And we also have to know that we can staff this with the health concerns of our teaching staff and other staff. So we're moving aggressively down the road, and I think we're going to be able to do this, but we're only going to be able to do it if we do it together. Next slide, please. So here's some of the submitted questions. We've kind of categorized some of these as terms of health and safety. We're working with the governor's office through our legal counsel on her interpretation of students supporting the sanitizing of desks. I will tell you the buckets and the systems of wipes that we got are no different than what they would use, that you would purchase in retail. They are completely safe. You have to know that with the frequency that this has to happen at the middle level, we will likely be having students be a part of that as they enter a classroom. We're trying to keep that off the shoulders of our teachers, but I know some of our teachers will be conscientious and will be guiding that. What every classroom will have to start is literally a 5-gallon pail that has, you know, hundreds of wipes in it. That will be provided in every classroom, in addition to all of our common areas having multiple hand sanitizing dispensers and a separate gallon jug of hand sanitizer in each classroom with a pump in that. So we'll be geared up to do this, but I think students can take some ownership and assurance that their workstation is sanitized if they're a part of it. And if that means we have to keep reloading sanitizing wipes, we will do that until we're at the point in time where we don't have to do that in between classes. I would say no to the second question there, certainly in terms of soap. We want to control what we're using, and we know that it's, you know, that it's approved. If your child has their own thing of sanitizer in their backpack, I think that would be fine. But as far as any community use in that and our routine functions, we'll have enough, and what we have is sound and solid as approved by the health department and emergency management. I talked about face masks. It's going to be represented in the code of conduct, and ultimately you'll get some detail after a couple of warnings. They would be moved to the online option. That health department case management protocol, I think you just need to know that that comes from the Macomb County Health Department, and they worked in a consortium of, I think, of 9 health departments across the state with considering CDC and Health and Human Service data to establish that. There are no restrictions on travel in the state of Michigan right now like there was in the spring. So, you know, if a family vacations on winter break and we're still in some modified hybrid schedule or over Thanksgiving, it still goes down to symptomatic, you know, and testing in that. So we're hopeful that you're making conscientious decisions in terms of what you are doing when you're vacationing and traveling, but ultimately we are not excluding families, and there is no requirement for us to do that in the roadmap guidance. Next slide. Spacing, movements, and access. I talked about lockers. Athletic equipment and band equipment, we really need to talk with our teachers and our administrators about how that's going to look. You know, we have band lockers in the band room and that, so we're really going to have to dig into that. So I appreciate whoever gave us that question, because quite honestly, we haven't dug into how that's going to work. How will students, that's elementary, the next one. I will tell you in terms of arrival and dismissal, you'll be getting kind of a graphic from Mr. Martz of how the flow of parent drop-off and pickup works, and where buses will be. Know that if you're driving or picking up your student from school, you kind of go through that east lot that is the athletic lot from the whole, and you're literally going to drive all the way around to the west side of the building and line up. But we may be asking parents who are doing drop-off to stagger your arrival so we can get students on the bus to school and in classrooms or on the way to classrooms before we start, you know, bringing kids in that were parent. And in that regard, you know, starting with the advisory allows the flexibility of that class period, because students might be coming into the school day across, you know, 10 to 15 minute time frame. And same with dismissal. We may exit all students from classes to the bus first, and then students that are parent pickup. So bear with us and we'll get you more detail on that. What factors determine what days your child attends on the hybrid schedule? When you know what cohort they're in and you know the schedule, you'll know when they attend. Yes, when we get to lunch, but remember, we're not doing in-person lunch through the hybrid start. But when we're still only bringing half of our traditional students in step 4, there will be adequate room in the middle school lunchroom, and we'll be using kind of a restaurant approach, or use these seats at these tables or not. More information on lunch when we get closer to step 4. I talked about transportation. If you opt out to begin the year because you're online, or you're just going to be traditional and drive, we'll provide that transition point later in the year if necessary. Next slide. The library, because we're setting it up brand new at the new middle school, is going to take time anyways, but we would fully intend to, at some point in time, to make sure that the resources in the library are a part of, probably connected, Mr. Martz, to English classes.
Yes, that is correct. They'll be working with English classes like they have done in the past.
So we might be pushing some of that function into English classes, or just staggering when English classes come to the media center when we're set up. Online option for adjusted studies classes, Mrs. Selden, can you give us that quick recap on that?
Absolutely. All of our special ed students and parents have a choice of virtual or in person with the hybrid model. If health and safety is a concern of yours, you will have that online option. Every student with an IEP is going to have an individualized meeting within the first couple months of school. And in that meeting, we are going to prepare special plans for both in-person instruction and virtual instruction, and talk about what differences and similarities those would have.
For our online platform, will it be all live instruction or some taped instruction as well? Final decisions on that aren't made yet, but I think you're going to see a significant amount of live instruction, but there will be asynchronous work as well, and that may include some videotaped lessons. Teachers are, our instructional task force is prioritizing some professional learning that our teachers need prior to the start of school. They'll be in for 2 full days on the 26th and 27th. And they report on the 25th. And then we're also using some of that afternoon time on the modified start to support their collaboration and training as well. The answer to the next question is no. If you're a traditional learning student, you have to attend all your classes in the hybrid schedule. You can't just do your core classes and not participate in your elective classes. We would want you to do all classes, likewise in the online option. Will teachers have kids online while they teach face-to-face? We're working through that plan, and based on how cohorting might happen, I think you could anticipate that some of that synchronous live instruction will definitely be a part of the hybrid schedule, but we're not completely there yet. And that takes some time with our instruction planning group, and that also takes some time in working with our education association. We are ramping up to try and support families that might need internet connectivity support. We're trying to lean on Verizon with what options they might be able to do for us. I know that we are planning to extend the ability to connect to the Wi-Fi at our schools from the parking lot. There may be the need, or you got to come within the distance of the building to log in so they can get some materials downloaded to their Chromebook or get access to submitting some things. So look for more information on that. I'm going to lean on Mr. Hill and Mr. Phillips to work with our online students and our students who are traditional on virtual days. I know that they've been doing a lot of study about the virus and instrumental music, and also about how they can make this work. It's certainly not going to be as thorough as it would be if we had the whole band class there at the same time. One of the blessings of the facility at the new high school for our traditional students. Because it was the formal high school with a theater, we're really looking at that as a large group instruction space for vocal and or instrumental music, because we really can provide social distancing there. But look for more information. If you're connected to the band program, I think Mr. Phillips has been sending parents some information about the, kind of the health and science of playing an instrument, in the COVID-19 era. Next slide, please. Well, I think you're in the middle of a bunch of information about the hybrid model and how it's going to work, and we certainly have more that we need to get to you. Students who are quarantined, and it might even be staff who are quarantined, will attend virtual learning. And that is the importance of a fluid schedule, because even if you're traditional, doing those remote Wednesdays are going to prepare everybody for what it looks like if we have to pivot to all remote or all remote for one group of kids. Hard copies, I think, is more of a elementary question, but the paper packet thing is really something that our teachers will be trying to not have be essential to our online options, but I'm going to defer to them when the time is right for that question. Next question is specific to high school. Students will be following their schedules. That's part of the hybrid. We are not going to have teachers bouncing in between classrooms. So the virtual academy is a slide I have coming up. I'll talk a little bit more about that there. But yes, students in that will have access to extracurriculars. And yes, they are considered a Romeo Community School student. So Mr. Martz led on to this a little bit. We've got to get kids back into learning regardless of their learning option. We'll be using NWA testing and some other assessments to assess loss, and then, targeted instruction and some of our supports that are already built into the middle school staff and schedule pre-COVID. It's going to take us some time to do that, and no one's got a perfect answer. The best remedy is that we work collectively as a state, as a region, and as a school district to get the full in-person, because that's going to give us the most access to do that. Next slide. Will live instruction be every day on the online option? Mr. Martz, with where your plans are at now, I would think every day is likely the goal, but probably not to start. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is looking at our goal right now is to provide as much online instruction, virtual live as possible. The parents want that, or our teachers want that, to be able to catch our students up and to provide that instructional opportunities for them. So that is our goal. And that's kind of the process that we're working on now to how to make that possible for our students.
When we talk about instruction in the afternoon, step 1 and step 2 has our online cohort number 3, engaging in the afternoon to start, but we'll transition them into the regular daily schedule as quickly as we can. I saw a question way on earlier, and I know it's been posed, is one of the documents talked about 15 to 20 minutes of instruction versus all day. Mrs. McFarland, I know that that didn't get presented the way it was intended. So do you want to talk about that through the lens of a middle school class versus what I think is perceived as they're only going to get 15 minutes a day?
So I think it's a complex answer, and I think we need to think about screen time with children. And if I'm an online student, the instruction is the key that we want students to be able to have time on screen to get the instruction from the teacher and have an opportunity to ask questions. So the idea of a minimum number of minutes, that's kind of a ballpark. But in the online option, it's not that we're asking your student to be live for 4 hours on let's say that 4-hour shortened day. As we move to a full day schedule, The minutes of instruction will be added, but it's not, we're not asking your online student to just sit in front of their screen. It's, we tried to give some parameters of time frame, and it probably wasn't worded as appropriate. But once you get the schedule that has more detail about when live instruction will be occurring and when the teacher communicates other times, I think it will be more clear for parents.
I think it's important you also understand that even if we're in regular schooling, my 4th hour math class might only have a 20-minute direct instruction period, and then we may be working independently on our own work. We're not going to make students sit on a live feed and do their work. We're gonna go live for the instruction and then offer that engagement time with the teacher in a couple different ways so that they can get help and support. All right, what do we have next here? I think there would be instances where virtual instruction could be recorded and you know, posted, but that will not be, you know, every day, every lesson, and that is something we've got to train our teachers on and incorporate over time as it makes the best sense. Talked about typical day and more detailed time schedules coming in the coming week. You don't have to worry about learning letter sounds, hopefully at the middle school. So I think we're good on that one. Next slide, please. So just a last series of some other questions. The first one was really specific to elementary, but you know, our staff IDs and that, and students are going to learn their teacher. Their teacher is going to look like this if you're traditional, more than like this, but they're going to engage with their teacher enough in the remote forum that they're gonna know them. And in some cases, some of the staff you'll have, your kids may already know them because of older siblings or that. Yes, speech sessions will be offered for students that need that service. Yes, social work will be offered for students who get that per their IEP. Meet teachers would be virtually, see classrooms may be virtually, virtual tour of the building, you know, that we can serve, but the traditional Bulldog Day is not something we're going to be able to do in phase 4. So Mr. Martz, I guess now is probably the right time if you have anything else you want to add to at least where you think you guys are at in terms of Bulldog Days and what parents maybe can at least know now.
Sure, we're working on our Bulldog Day stuff right now. We're going to try to do everything as possible, virtually as possible. We have limited number of visitors in the building. Pictures, we're looking at doing pictures at a different stated time instead of before the school year this year. Possibly providing lunch cards to their students so they can get lunch earlier on. So you will see a bunch of information coming out here by next week about how to get to the information virtually to us to get set up. Again, that advisory that Dr. Robinson talked about at the very beginning, which is a great new program they're using at school, will be really used to help orientate our students to the social distancing, the safety protocols that are going to be put in place in school, as well as help our students navigate the hallways. So we're looking really forward, working on getting those plans set up and ready to go by next week, and that information should be forthcoming to you guys.
So SAC is a licensed program that can take 12-year-old students, and on some limited occasions in the past, Mr. Martz, I think you guys might have had some students at Romeo Middle that attended at Amanda Moore.
Yeah, very few, 1 or 2 last year.
I would not anticipate that, and I definitely, middle school parents, do not anticipate that we can provide your 6th grader SAC because when they get out of school, there's a period of time for another 50 minutes to an hour where elementary students are still in school. So I would not lean on that in the hybrid schedule, but as we would provide that, we also have limited numbers in different licensed rooms for SAC now in the COVID-19 situation. So our capacity to even offer that to elementary students might be capped until we can potentially license more areas of the building. Talked about traveling. Honor Society. Mr. Martz or Mr. Emil, I think you're on, or Mr. Martz, if not, I'm sure there's some parents out there that got some thinking a little bit about sports. So maybe a quick check-in on sports, if that makes sense.
Sure. So sports right now, we're following the guidelines. Oh, Steve, you're on there. Thanks, Steve.
Yes. As some of you might know, we belong to what is called MAMSA, which is the Macomb Area Middle School Athletic Association. I have been talking to our athletic directors, and obviously a lot of that stuff is up in the air. The MHSAA is going to release more information on the 20th. Just taking a look at our football schedule right now, 5 of the 6 games that we have are against schools that are all virtual, 3 from Utica Community Schools, 2 from Chippewa Valley. So, I don't think they've made decisions on how they're going to handle athletics yet. Traditionally, our sports don't start until the first day of school anyway, so, more information to come. Fingers crossed that our kids can play this year. I have 2 athletes as well that are playing fall sports, so obviously we're hoping that they can have that experience this year.
And what athletics look like in the fall may be very different than by the time we get to winter. The last question there, I'm certainly empathetic to, probably a bit of a loaded question to just make sure it's on our radar of how difficult this is for all of you to navigate the hybrid and balance that with your work schedule. I apologize for that. We really want to try and get some in-person learning started for those families that are comfortable with it. And in order to do that and meet the health and safety guidelines, we really have to start with this modified schedule that's going to have kids home. Certain days of the week, and for those of you that think it's better, every day of the week. Next slide, please. So quickly on the Virtual Academy. The Virtual Academy was in planning for really more than a year now. Romeo Community Schools has not provided a virtual option. This is really more common at the high school level. But we are allowing access to students in grades 6 through 8. If you believe this might be the right option for you, this option isn't specific to health and safety. Okay, this option has some different factors, but the way you would go through orientation is if you indicate this on your learning option, you're going to hear from one of our counselors, and your counselors. The counselor will take you through about a 20-minute transition meeting. Make sure you understand what our online option is and what the Virtual Academy option is, so that we can get you placed correctly. But then if you are recommended and you are going to attend, or your child's going to attend the Virtual Academy, you go into your own orientation. We do provide a learning lab, but there isn't any requirement to attend in person, and that learning lab is a dedicated classroom or 2 that will be in the Powell building. So I would really tell you that if that is something you're thinking, we have a flyer that will be sent to all middle and high school parents and posted. It's already posted on our webpage, but we have a meeting with our virtual learning team and our counselors tomorrow, and we will be putting that flyer up to families afterwards. But if you want more information, because you're on the forum, I'll tell you, if you go into the website and you go to the schools tab, Romeo Virtual Academy has their own page and a PDF of the flyer, and that information is there. Virtual Academy students are probably not going to start class until the 8th, but the week of the 31st will be their orientation sessions. That will likely be a combination of virtual for some and maybe in person for some others. Yes, yes.
Dr. Robinson, there's questions about the curriculum and the content in the Romeo Virtual Academy. And I just wanted to let parents know these are not, it's not Romeo content. It is aligned to the Michigan standards. And if you are a high school student, it's aligned to the Michigan Merit Curriculum requirements. But they are third-party vendors that our board has approved for us to utilize. They will have a Romeo staff member as a mentor, but the content and curriculum are not Romeo teachers or Romeo curriculum.
Thank you. Yes, those students are still considered a Romeo Community Schools student, both middle and high school. Next slide, please. So next steps, we'll take care of getting our preparedness plan to the ISD, of course. We got a high school forum tomorrow. I'm not sure that we'll conduct any further parent forums, but certainly continue to give you information as we further develop the roadmap, continue to correspond. We really want to support your needs. If you think there's questions that, the high school administration could help with answering, I'm trying to maintain being the portal of every reply to a school messenger email, but, I typically can navigate the 60 to 90 I get a day, and in recent days that's getting more than 200, and I really have asked our building leaders to step in and begin to help, because I do want to get replies to all of our parents, but I know that there's time sensitivity here. Feel like we have enough information out there for you to make your learning option choice, but if there's something else that you think you need to understand a little better, I would ask you to work through Mr. Martz and his team, but don't hesitate if you want to reach out to me. I might forward that to one of them, but want to do what we can to help you in making your choice. You're going to see some updates that are roadmap connected prior to the 24th, but the 24th is the next regular school board meeting, and we will be updating the board that evening. The board has had a little bit of conversation about the possibility of calling a special meeting next week to just get an update on what families have chose, if there's any changing dynamic in health and safety, any different communication coming out of the governor's office, and also if we have any dramatic concerns in our ability to staff the in-person option due to our staff members, pursuing any kind of FMLA or health leave. So that's a sensitive issue. I would ask you to be respectful to that. They have their own families and their own concerns, and they're hardworking, great people, and I know many of them are eager to get back in person and do this right. If we do, I see that, Mrs. Rosso, yes, all meetings are public, and access and the link to that would be on the webpage, no different than a regular meeting. All committee meetings, all workshops, so certain items by law in a meeting can be done in a closed session, and the board is going to continue to meet virtually probably into the fall. So we've got to prepare for the staff return, and then of course the opening of school and the hybrid start schedule is going to guide that. Next slide, please. All right, Mr. Martz, do you see any themes coming out of the chat that maybe we could speak to?
Sure. There was a couple of questions on busing. Busing in regards to if they opt out or not, are they still able to drop students off in the morning and then get transportation home? And if they choose, will they be able to get busing at some other point in time if they choose not to at the first time?
Answer A is, say you're going to use transportation when you do your registration gateway work, so that we have you slotted for a stop. Many of our families, in regular times, you drop off, but your child takes the bus home, especially on the modified days. We're just going to consider you, a bus student. The transportation department might be curious about why, if you're a Singleton stop, no one's there across the first few days. If you feel like it's important, when we get closer to the start of school, to let, Michelle and the team down there know, hey, we're in, make sure we have a stop, but, we're only going to be using the bus in the afternoon. The drivers are really good about picking up on that. So, but yes, and then as far as re-engaging with transportation, if you start the year not using it, Yes, at the time where we might be bringing online students back in or traditional students onto the bus, I would just tell you that we're going to need the time to make sure that the routes are reorganized if you're a stop that is only you. What else do we got, Mr. March?
On attendance, there's a couple of questions on attendance wise in regards to having students, if they're online, do they need to call in for those days they're missing? And if a student is in person and missing days based on being quarantined for a set amount of time, is there penalties on attendance for them too as well?
I'm going to take the first part of that, which was the last thing you mentioned. If you are quarantined because of our case management protocols, there is not a penalty. We are still waiting for guidance from the MDE and the legislature on what adjustments, that they're going to make. We cannot have a traditional count day that's connected to the funding we receive, but for some reason our legislature doesn't understand that. And we've been pleading that since really mid-May. We got all that forgiveness at the end of the year, but it's kind of hung up right now in the legislature. And I think this weekend there's some sessions scheduled that are supposed to address that. Mrs. McFarland, can you talk a little bit about at least where we're at right now in terms of attendance tracking for online students and students on remote days?
So if there is a scheduled live session, our expectation would be that students log into that through the Google Meet link that will be in Schoology. So I saw some people mention Google Classroom. At the middle school and high school, we use Schoology. So we will spend time teaching our students and giving some parents some support on how to use Schoology. But if there's live instruction, our expectation would be for them to log into that. They are, if it's asynchronous work, they should be in the asynchronous work when a class is scheduled. And through Schoology, we can keep track of who is logging in and getting into the work that they're required to do. As Dr. Robinson said, the idea of student attendance and hours of instruction and count day, those are all things that we're still waiting for some updates and some clarification from the state. But expectation is if a class is scheduled, a student should be in there, whether it be a live session or asynchronous work.
So if your child is ill, hopefully never for a COVID-19 circumstance, I would just, when in doubt, work the way you would when we're back to normal. The attendance office will still be there. Mr. Martz and Mr. Emil will still have clerical staff that are tracking that. We're not removing the function of attendance from the office and putting it all on the teachers. But we will need to track it to some extent, and that will be a little bit easier and a little bit more normal for students in traditional than online.
The next couple kind of revolve around social distancing. The first part was that is restrooms being monitored for social distancing and hanging out in the hallways or hallway usage, and also staggered start or dismissal times that are occurring for our students.
So good question. We got some good hall monitors that have worked at Powell and Romeo Middle over the past few years, and we're hopeful that they'll all be back. We're also looking at adding additional hall monitor staff. So if any of you know people that might be interested in that, including you, be looking for the possibility of us recruiting some additional hall monitors to just support spacing, movement, and social distancing. And the middle school restrooms, the old high school, they're certainly a little tighter than the new high school. However, not much different than Romeo Middle or Powell. What is typically becoming a protocol is the need to rely on students knowing that there shouldn't be more than X students in the restroom at a time. And part of shortening the day is also hoping that there's less need to use the restroom, but there's no way a 4-hour day might completely eliminate that. We also need to have a conversation with our teachers about, does it work better for that to happen from a class versus during a passing time? But I think with our hall monitors and our administration and some signage and marking, we might be kind of trying to limit the number of kids. Hanging out in the bathroom is a thing of the past in COVID, if students even felt all right about doing that non-COVID. I think that's probably pretty good on that, Mr. Martz. Anything else to add?
No, I think you did pretty well on that.
Right. So the message is not hold it until you get home, because that's not how we want to approach it either. All right, what else do we got, Mr. Martz?
We have a couple on before and after school. What timeline can students come before school, and is there any opportunity for them to be someplace else after school?
Other than what we would scale, I think in terms of athletics and extracurriculars, right now is the only option that we have. We did run a Before the Bell program last year at Romeo Middle that really tapered off to little or no participation. We have had no conversation about that at this time. I think parents, you need to be ready for the start of the school year, that if it's 18 and you get your communication from Mr. Martz and team that we want parent drop off to happen, in between, 8:20 and 8:25, we don't need you there at 7:30, because you're gonna be sitting in your car with your student in your car waiting. As we get to phase 5 and a better system, we'll try and make that as efficient as possible. We also just want to see what's it look like if we just do it the way we used to do it. But we can't have large groups of students standing in a corridor or a hallway or even the cafeteria waiting for the bell to ring. That's just not an option that it comes anywhere close to matching what phase 4 and what the requirements of the preparedness plan actually is set forth for us. So I think that helps. Staggered arrival and dismissal is definitely something we'll be doing. And when I say staggered, that is really probably going to be at over the course of maybe 10 or 12 minutes at most. We just haven't decided of whether it's easier for us to do parents first or parent transport first or the bus, but we'll be working on that. Staggered dismissal times in between class is something we still are going to be looking at. But I will tell you, the way that they have set up the grade levels and the teams in the new building, students in a grade levels, most of their courses, their core area classes will be in close proximity to each other for sure. So there isn't a lot of crossover in terms of across teams other than electives. That's pretty safe for me to say about that, right, Brad?
Yes, for sure.
And remember only half of the students who choose traditional are there, which I'm thinking is going to be, 38 to 40% of the students. Anything else?
There was one question in regard to content on the Romeo Virtual Academy. Is that information available to review ahead of time for the curriculum that's being offered in that situation?
I think all we could do as a part of your transition experience would be, Mrs. McFarlane, I think we could probably give them the providers, and whatever the providers might have on their website is probably about all we could provide for review.
That would be correct. There are several providers that we would work with to create a schedule for the Romeo Virtual Academy students, which would include, if they're a middle school student, it would include 6 classes, so their core classes as well as electives. And so it could come from a variety of the providers that we work with, and whatever they would have available on their website, once that's decided, you could see what they have. But I don't have it to give to you.
That covers the bulk of them, I believe. I try to catch them all as they're coming through, and I kind of categorize them. I believe there's one that came through in regards to Chromebooks and Schoology. Schoology is web-based, so the Chromebooks do not need to be updated for that. Some of our classes and teachers have used them in the past, so it's not an issue using that program whatsoever on the Chromebooks. But that covered the bulk of them that I caught through there, Dr. Robinson, in the chat section.
Okay. All right. We've been at it for an hour and 35 minutes now. So if there's other themes that come out of the chat, I'll work with Mr. Martz to make sure that we have that input. Most importantly, if it's simply comments, but if it's actually comments or things, specific questions that we can get answers to you, we actually will. So I appreciate you joining this evening. I hope that this has been helpful. We'll get this recording posted on the website. I'm hoping by noon tomorrow. If you have other parents or if you want to go back again, please work towards completing the registration gateway process so that we can get your learning option declared, because that's really a next step of critical information. So thank you for attending tonight, and let us know how else we can help.